Part fantasy, part reality, Ladakh is where the forces of nature conspired to render a magical realist landscape. A landscape of extremes, desert and blue waters, burning sun and freezing winds, glaciers and sand dunes. A primeval battleground of the titanic forces which gave birth to the Himalayas. One billion years ago, India was an island landmass gradually moving northwards. Then some 60 million years ago, it actually collided with the Eurasian continent. And the result of this unimaginable cataclysm was the birth of the Himalayas. The sediments between the two opposing landmasses joined with the upthrusting rock to actually form the Himalayas. And this, the line drawn by the Indus and the Brahmaputra with Mount Kailash at its center, is the actual stitching point, the suture in geological parlance between the two continents. A virtual Shangri-La. Ladakh, or as the name translates, land of high passes, was for centuries inaccessible, except through long, high and dangerous pass crossings. From the southeast to the west, the great Himalaya stretches, punctuated by a few high passes like the Taglangla, Potla and the Zojila. Towards the east, the 17,600-foot Changla Pass leads to the plateau region of eastern Ladakh. And to the north, at an awesome 18,200 feet, lies the Khardungla, gateway to the Nubra Valley. Open only during the summer months, these high passes rigidly controlled ingress into this remote kingdom. The coming of motor transport eased the situation, though year-round access had to await the coming of the aircraft. North of the Indus Valley, across the Khardungla, lies the valley of the river Shyok. Shyok means the river of death, and this Yarkandi name was probably given it by the Central Asian traders who littered this fantastic landscape with their bones over the centuries. Amidst all this grim desolation lie the oases of the Nubra Valley, and with it there's a vibrant Buddhist culture. The bleakness of the landscape and the inaccessibility probably contributed a lot to the development of the unique Trans-Himalayan Buddhist culture, where generations of monks in fairy tale monasteries have developed philosophical concepts devolving around silence and emptiness, as well as a world-renowned tradition of religious art. In the east and southeast, bordering Tibet and geologically contiguous, are the rolling high-altitude grasslands of the Changtang and the Rupture. This is the region of the Great Lakes of Ladakh, cousins to even bigger ones in Tibet, and leftovers, as some geologists suspect, of the ancient sea that once covered Ladakh and Tibet. Now, who'd think to find an ice-lined beach at 15,000 feet above sea level? Well, Ladakh is home to some of the mightiest lakes in the Himalayas. And this is Pangong Tso, a full 80 kilometers long, although no more than 8 kilometers at its widest. Home to a multitude of bird species in the summer, paradise for bird lovers. But freezing over now, all the birds are gone, migrated down to the plains. The waters of the Pangong are brackish and salty, for the Pangong constitutes a unique hydrological divide. All waters to its south and west flow into the Indus River system and eventually thus to the Indian Ocean. To the north, the waters are doomed to be confined to the Pangong until the process of evaporation finally liberates them. Further south, across the Indus, lies the Rupture Plateau, an open expanse of high-altitude valleys and freezing winds dominated by the awesome Sommerrari and Sokar lakes. This is the magical Sommerrari. In summer, Sommerrari is a breeding ground for a variety of bird species like bar-headed geese, the great crested grebe, and the brown-headed gull. A legendary lake stretching 30 kilometers long, perhaps 7 to 10 kilometers wide along its length. It's situated upon a high, windswept plain occupied at most by the hardiest nomads in the world and surrounded on all sides by towering peaks. The lake itself serves as a giant drainage basin for these towering eminences, and the waters are therefore brackish, for there is no outlet. Here, on this lonely snow-dusted plain near Chushul, stands a memorial to the heroes of Rezangla, where 214 men fought the invading Chinese to the last man in 1962. But the history of modern warfare in Ladakh goes back further, to the famous Zojila operation of November 1948, where hitherto only mule caravans had passed. The Indian Army, in an act comparable to Hannibal's bringing elephants across the Alps, took tanks across the Zojila in a brilliant outflanking of the Pakistani raiders who had taken Kargil and were threatening Leh.
Hello, Victor 1-5, sit rep. Victor 2 now clear of enemy MMG post. Destroyed enemy bunkers, 4 on Chabudra slopes, 2 on Mukund Ridge. Entering Gumri Valley now. Victor 1-5, over.
The years since, leading up to the Siachen conflict, have seen Ladakh acquire the dubious distinction of being the world's highest battlefield. A healthy consequence, though, has been the development of the Indian Army as one of the finest mountain and high-altitude forces in the world. Ladakh gets very little snowfall, but appearances can be deceptive. Temperatures can plunge to minus 50 degrees centigrade, and right here in the sunshine, we're dealing with minus 7 degrees. Ladakh winters are intensely cold. By December, the rivers start icing up. The size of the ice floes gradually increasing until the entire river is covered. The landscape acquires a fairy tale look, and by January, the cold is so intense that even the Great Lakes freeze over with a thick mantle of ice. Temperatures of between -30 and -50 are now common, and yet people not only survive, they thrive. Faces smeared with animal fat, protection against both the sun and the wind. These are the Changspa, the Pashmina goat herding nomads of Ladakh's far eastern regions, adjoining the Tibetan plateau. Here on the Changthang, where high altitude plains stretch as far as the eye can see, the shepherds are the only inhabitants, along with their valuable flock. The Pashmina goat has the finest fleece of them all. The shawls made from this wool have commanded high prices across the centuries. The lucrative trade in Pashmina was one of the magnets attracting the invaders who made Ladakh's history so volatile. Around 1690, the entire Pashmina export was ceded to the Mughals, and its export and transit through Ladakh became a Kashmiri monopoly. Things have changed, even dress modes, as the 20th century catches up with the Changspa, but the routine remains the same. Night in this fearsome landscape, where wolves and mountain cats abound, and the flock is safely corralled, and the shepherd snug in his yak hair-lined tent. People live in Ladakh at altitudes ranging from 10 to 14,000 feet. And the biggest town is, of course, Leh, which became the capital in the 17th century. Its position, with the Khardungla at its back, made it a focal point of the hustle and bustle of the Central Asian trade route. Physically, Leh is still pretty much the same as it was in 1840, during the heyday of the Central Asian trade route. The main bazaar lined with villagers and their wares. But however, instead of the Yarkandi ponyman or the Central Asian merchant in his long black coat and high black leather boots, you're more likely to see and jeeps and tourists in t-shirts and shorts, and it's all very much changed. A winter market day in Leh, however, offers a glimpse sans tourists, as villagers crowd the bazaar, seeking to buy or sell. Goldsmiths are doing roaring business, for the Ladakhis love jewelry. The warmth, geniality, and sheer love of life of the Ladakhis contrasts starkly with their surroundings. They live well, with houses in a village well spaced, surrounded by their own fields. Crime is unheard of, and their houses are handsome constructions. Ladakhi architecture uses insulative blocks of river sand with chopped straw and the like as binders. This is the ubiquitous construction materials used everywhere, from monasteries to houses, from short ends to money walls. Above all, the Ladakhis are a deeply religious people, and Buddhism rules every aspect of their lives. The short ends are repositories of the relics and bones of long-dead ancestors and lamas, who continue to extend their beneficent protection to all travelers passing through a landscape frequented by spirits, trolls, and demons. Money walls mark the path and similarly protect and shelter, emblazoned as they are with fine carvings of the Buddha and the repeated invocation of Om Mani Padme Hum. Hail to the jewel in the lotus. The monastic tradition is itself a result of the tradition of meditating in remote and secluded places, something that was common to all religions in India in ancient times. In Ladakh, caves were the natural choice, and the majority of these are associated with Buddhist yogins who are believed to have meditated in them. The most famous of these yogins is obviously Padmasambhava, the great yogin magician who carried Buddhism through the Himalayas in the 8th century. Today, such complexes of caves can be seen in many places through Ladakh, such as here at Basgo, further on at Saspol and Lamayuru. But of course, over the centuries, many of these caves have come to form the core of great monasteries. Most of Ladakh's well-known gompas occupy high promontories along the main Indus Valley. Instead, we take you across the Khardungla to the legendary Deskit Gompa in the Nubra Valley. Nubra has remained a highly restricted area till very recently, and consequently has so far escaped the cultural commercialization that swamps the main Indus Valley every summer. तो हमें चाहिए तो हमें भी मिल जाएगा हड्डी का अच्छा हड्डी का नहीं मिलेगा हड्डी का प्लास्टिक का नहीं मिलेगा ना Built over 1,000 years ago upon a lower hill and then relocated to the site of the king's palace about 500 years ago. The Gompa at Deskit is by far the most beautiful and imposing in the entire Nubra Valley. In a dark prayer hall near the top of the Gompa stand assembled a host of tantric divinities, their fearsome visages covered with protective cloth. Mahakal, Manjushri, all stand shrouded in the gloom, awaiting their once-a-year unveiling at the time of the Gompa festival. Even though you may not think it to look around, this barren, inhospitable wilderness contains a fair amount of predators like the snow leopard and the lynx. Besides domestic and wild yaks, these prey on the kiang, the Ladakhi wild ass. The kiang is a fascinating animal, glossy, well-muscled. They move in herds on the high plateau regions of eastern Ladakh. The kiang is not having an easy time of it though, even in such a remote habitat. With expanding herds of domestic yaks and mules in the main Indus Valley, herders are also increasingly frequenting these high grasslands. Expanding hordes of jeep-borne tourists who love to chase the kiangs at high speeds are probably bringing in a stress factor unknown to the species.
In Ladakh, we have very many rare species of animals and birds which are not found anywhere in India or the world. For example, the yak, the ibex, the snow leopard, the blue sheep, the musk deer, the wild horse, which are known as keangs, red foxes, the black-necked crane, which unfortunately is in the endangered species and we really have to look after it, the bar-headed geese, the snowcock, etc. Now, because of the tight protection offered by the army in this area, these endangered species, as also some of the endangered species As far as wildlife, which I just mentioned, the flora and fauna are also being protected. We are also assisting the civil administration in doing their bit as far as the protection of these rare and endangered species are concerned. We are assisting the civil administration as far as erection of fencing is concerned, demarcation of boundaries. We have also placed guards at some clutch of eggs recently as far as the black-necked crane was concerned. We are also carrying out elimination of ownerless dogs which pose a threat to these eggs. And I have ensuring that there is no poaching or illegal felling of trees or any hunting, shikar being carried out in this area.